thing has been hit. Hey guys, what's going on? Memes here. I'm here with Paradiso from the Greater Theories of Everything community. Now, are you also part of the Theories of Nothing community?
I don't
Basically,
know.
you don't need to disclose at all,
Yeah,
but
that's
it's
kind of a
usually if you join this Discord, because
thing.
that's how a lot of these things start.
Yeah, no comment.
Okay, no, that is smart. That is smart. That's very wisey. But
I don't
you
want
had
to
done a
attract
contest.
malicious forces.
Oh no! That's fine. You're on with the memes of destruction. What type of malicious forces would be coming after you? But all I'm saying is now you had done an entry for the Kurt's Pace One contest. Shout out to Kurt from Theories of Everything. But you had done an entry, and I really didn't know a dang thing about the CTMU. I just remember my brother's like, this dude is really smart. Kurt interviewed him. You should watch it. And every time I clicked on it, I kept getting a YouTube error. So that discouraged me enough that I didn't really care to actually listen to it. And
Oh, interesting.
basically, your video was like my first real entree into Mr. Christopher Langan's CTMU.
Yeah,
Could
yeah.
you let us know a little bit about that and what's going on?
Uh, yeah. So Chris Langan is, I don't know how you would describe him in a general sense. He's an autodidact. So he doesn't have college credentials. He chose to drop out of college, so he's entirely self-taught in regards to math, philosophy, and physics. And while he was, living life, he was working on this theory of everything called the CTMU. And the CTMU is a metaphysical theory of everything that basically describes reality as self-configuring and self-processing. So
I mean, that sounds pretty cool. It sounds kind of like a computer.
yeah, it very much is like a computer. I guess more so in a not a computer in what we typically think of. So Chris Lang would probably describe it as a proto computer. So people, I've discussed this with people before. They're like, "What the hell do you mean by proto computer?" Kind of like a higher order computer. That
A computer that to us we cannot distinguish it being a computer per se or something like that, or
Well, there are certain processes which we can directly identify, but there are certain things which go on underneath the surface. So, in the CTMU, regular computation would be confined to what's called the terminal domain, which is the stuff we see around us, and then all of the more proto-computational stuff happens in the non-terminal domain.
oh, so kind of like hypercomputation or something. Because if it's going to be on like a higher level per se, or is it a lower level per se, or is it the higher level stuff doing the lower level stuff?
It's more
I
like it's more like I guess the non-terminal domain allows for an arbitrarily higher orders above the terminal domain. So I'm not familiar with the term hyper computation,
it's
but
I'm just using that in a method that I literally just made up. I'm sure it's an actually. I apologize to my friends in the computational community for speaking such sacrilegious words, but here's my question.
It's turtles all the way down.
Yay? Nay?
so is it turtles all the way down? Well, in the CTMU, Chris Langan would say that it terminates at God. So God is basically, if we're using the computation analogy, and you have programmers of computers, right? So who's programming this computer we're in? Well, it has to regress to God, and that's what Chris Langan would say. And then there are intermediary levels in between that, different strata.
That okay. I'm gonna have to push back, especially because the more and more I learn about science, for me personally, I believe in God more. I want to agree with that a lot, and I tend to agree with that a lot. But now, when Mr. Langdon says God, or as you don't necessarily know exactly what he means unless you're going to like read a quote or something, or you know exactly what he means. But in your opinion, when Mr. Langdon is speaking the term God, what's he talking about?
Okay, so in my opinion, and from my experience, my understanding of the CTMU, God is basically, well, I like to use I like to
It's
talk
not
about
easy. It's not an easy thing when you're really trying to
not
think about it. You want to say the correct words because we use that term a lot. And dude, and I've used the term a lot, and it's like, what do I actually mean about it? I was just doing it because it was convenient. The more and more I go along, I'm like, I don't know if it's just because you just fake it till you make it, or it's just like when you
Yeah.
actually like use some of those old adages that we used to say, like please and thank you. At least for me, it's like I feel like sometimes still doing those things, people as human beings are still actually appreciative, especially if it hasn't happened to them a lot. And it's like if things are going in another direction and people are just doing the other thing because that's what everyone else is doing, what if you did the opposite thing? Or maybe not the exact opposite thing, but you did something a little different, something a little nicer. Maybe that would make the world a better place. I apologize, I cut you off to do a rant. Stop me anytime. Oh yeah, we were just,
Well, yeah. Thanks for
what,
letting me know because I
who
I
or
tend
what
to
is
be a bit
God? Yeah,
passive.
that's all.
I tend to be a bit passive when people kind of talk over me or like they go on about stuff.
I'll
So
shut off my mic, sorry.
okay, so I don't want to reduce it to a traditional Orthodox religion type description because that tends to turn people away. Okay, when I describe it to people in my real life and I tell them my own spiritual beliefs, I say that reality as a whole is identical to God. So like in its entirety, because reality, um, it can just choose whatever the hell it wants to do. You want to talk about free will? God has the ultimate kind of free will. So that's another way of describing it because free will is a little bit complex. I think we do have free will, us humans, but it's not like we have complete freedom, right? God has complete freedom, and
I believe, sorry to interject, but I think Mr. Tyler Goldstein may disagree with that.
oh really? What would he
I
say?
haven't interviewed him yet, but it kind of, I've heard from some of his live streams that this is the thing, it almost depends on, kind of going back to, I'm not sure if you looked at any of like Dr. Eric Weinstein's geometric unity. He proposes something like the observerse, and my best bet to that is, what if you took what we colloquially know as our universe, and what if you were an outside observer of that? Like, what if you were outside, hypothetically, a potentially enclosed, or at that point, you are outside said system? If one could do that, how would one try to create things like that? So it's like, are you viewing it from the inside? At that point, it's like, oh, well, it has all these different degrees of freedom. And maybe if the outside's like, no, I mean, that's going to happen. I mean, all those things may have just kind of like in the whole, if we're going to do a Feynman diagram, what way does a potential particle travel? It travels all the past, man. What? That's freaking crazy. But if it's going to go by the principle of like least action or something, once you sum out all the kind of crazy paths that don't really make a lot of sense or require a lot of effort, you're actually going to end up finding the most likely path for whatever system it is. And especially if one were to consider maybe our universe, colloquially again, is eternal, whether it's bouncing and crunching, a steady state-ish, whatever it is, big bang, steady state, yada yada, whatever it might be, it's like, well, if it exists for eternity, I learned from Sean Carroll, infinity is a long time. So those things might eventually happen anyway. But again, I'm sorry I cut you off there. What were we talking about? Oh, free will and stuff like that. Well, this is the thing. Like we were talking about, it's like, what do you think Mr. Langen's saying when he says God? And I'll give you one more thing to riff on, because I had to push back. I'm not even sure if that was pushback. But at the same time, I remember Professor Peterson at one point, like, if we're going to say, what if the universe was God? And I may tend to agree with that because, well, what is God? God is the one. It is basically, it is what is omnipotent, omniscient, and omnipresent, all powerful, all knowing, everywhere. And it's like, to us, I think we use the term universe. So I mean, that's why I think the meme of like, in the mind of God resonates with a lot of people, because there might be a lot of physicists that are like,
Yeah.
not a bad answer. I mean, as far as we know, unless we go and just are like,
You know, turtles all the way down.
For me, I like to just this is just for clarification in case there's any miscommunication. I like to distinguish between universe and reality. So universe, I'm referring to like the physical stuff around us, whereas reality as a whole is whatever the hell is outside that we have yet to classify as being part of the physical, right?
That's interesting. Go on.
Yeah, because sometimes people seem to think that whenever I talk about the universe, I'm talking about reality as a whole, but not exactly.
No. Well, this is interesting. This is interesting because, again, sorry to interject, but one of the things that I hear, just like within the greater like TOE community and stuff, some folks they're focused very much on it's like quantum electrodynamics, or it's like Big G, or it's like quantum field theory and E8. What the heck is actually going on, folks? You have all those different things where it's like, don't get me wrong, I love that type of stuff. I love sitting on Wolfram Alpha just for hours and just doing all these different computations and stuff. It's fascinating, and you might have some numbers, and you might have a good story with the numbers, but how do you get from some numbers run from a computation up to, I like chocolate?
One thing.
Yeah, I mean, there seems to be some level of a gap there. I mean, but I think if the more and more we can figure out universe, the more and more we can figure out us, and if we can solve one or the other, I think that's going to help map to the other.
Right. I think people need to understand if they're, and this is I'm referring to the other people in the TOE community, because it seems like the TOE community is kind of, it's like you're either more along the scientist side or the philosophical side, if that makes sense. So looking at some like metaphysics versus a grand unified physics theory or model or whatever. And people need to realize if you are going with the physics side or the science side, you're immediately going to be committing to working within the bounds of science. And so that's immediately going to limit what exactly you're going to be able to describe about reality. Whereas if you take a approach which is more meta, so like it takes into account science, but it transcends it, which is the philosophical approach, then I think you have a better chance at actually getting somewhere. Now, that's not to discredit these people that are like interested in unified field theories or whatever, because I'm sure like that's beneficial, right? Science is hugely beneficial.
I mean, we wouldn't be having this conversation if it weren't for like science and stuff like that. So I mean, it's I'd say pretty useful, long track record. Yeah.
I come from an engineering background, so I have to, I feel obliged to say that. Like, I'm interested in metaphysics and philosophy, but also like science as well. So.
Well, that's the thing. For science, it's like you've got this tower that's been built upon all these different things, and we're continuing to build more towers in different directions. Some of these towers get pretty high, and it's like, were we able to reach the stratosphere? Not quite. When are we gonna get there? Like probably 2 weeks. 30 years later, when are we gonna get there? Maybe 2 weeks or something like that. And you just look at what people are talking about, and I sit back and I to harken back to something I'd heard from Professor Wolfram at one point. It's like, he even said it's like all the 5 main areas of physics and stuff like that. It's like, I think we're all kind of talking about the same thing. We're just coming at it from like just different angles of attack, so to speak. And like, if we're all kind of talking about the same thing, it's like, well, who has a good idea? Maybe this person, this group over here, they have a great idea about this. And if we were to take this and fit this in here, that's why it's like, I tend to be very transient. Like, I hop around between a lot of different groups and stuff like that. Yeah. And it's like, I'm not necessarily there all the time, but then again, if you're there in a particular place within a certain group and you're not getting enough perspectives before, sometimes you might be like, oh my God, we're there, we're almost there, we're going to get there and everything. And it might not the whole, like, when people like to throw shade at string theory, and to be fair to string theory and everything, it's like, one of the things I heard from Professor Witt at one point is like, string theory showed that mathematics could describe like reality. Like, did it really need to be that way? Because that's just a fascinating point. I feel like a lot of folks are like, well, this is the big buzzword that people know. So we're just going to kind of add this into our papers and stuff like
Right,
that for greater search terms. I'm like, is this just basic web mechanics and stuff like that? Even if they're not necessarily even doing string theory, my thing is, I'm not going to really hate on the player. I'm like, well, if that's the game, does this really surprise everyone? My thing is, I prefer to see us, yes, harken back, you level up, so to speak, where whatever method we're using, whether it's logic-based via calculus, whether it's differential equations, whether it's geometric aspects and components of it, no matter what we're doing, eventually due to combinators and stuff, they should be translatable anyway.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like,
absolutely.
That's why I actually liked your video, and we'll actually go into it just a little bit right here.
Well, can I make a quick comment on that? Because I really I highly value that attitude that you described. Basically, being transient and kind of hopping all over the place, getting as much perspective as you can, because I think one thing that, in my view, is a travesty to do if you're interested in anything really, is to stay too reductionistic and not getting enough perspective. And if we're interested in understanding absolute truth, whatever is absolutely true, it's going to be invariant with respect to the models, the various different perspectives that we come at it from. And so that kind of behooves us to do that, because it's going to benefit us. I think that's kind of the approach I try to live by.
That what you just said there, Paradiso, is that resonates with me, just because at the same time I'm like, well, aren't we looking for truth? Because if we're looking for truth, we want to figure out what's actually going on. And if we want to figure out what's going on, if we're computationally limited entities, like if we're limited when we want to maximize like our knowledge base, how could we do that? I don't know. I think we got like 8 billion other human beings in the world. Yeah. That sounds like good folks to play off of and everything. If you know something that I don't, I'd like to know, and that's why I have you here.
Yeah, and humility is huge too. I mean, that's I guess I don't want to say arrogance is hand in hand with reductionism, but I feel like if you stay too reductionistic, in a sense, you're not being humble enough about the fact that really you should be more skeptical. And really, it's like, well, what the hell do I know actually? And I learned that from Peterson. I really internalized that from Peterson, because just the way he talks about stuff, it just kind of made me think more skeptically.
He's
about
passionate. No. He's passionate.
Yeah.
He's convincing. That's also a reason a lot of folks like him and don't like him. I brought that up. No, separate story. But I want to get into your video just because I like the way you line this out here. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna bring it up here. We'll embiggen it and stuff. And do you mind if I have your channel? I listed your channel below.
Oh yeah, that's notes perfectly and stuff. Fine.
So, okay, so what we're gonna do is we're gonna go through this. I assume I have your permission.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay, we're gonna go through this and let's just do some commentary.
Throughout human history, philosophers have pondered what exactly consciousness is. Now,
is that
what if I
stable
told
diffusion?
you someone figured it out?
Wait, what?
Oh, sorry. I was asking, was that a stable diffusion transformation for the kind of like the evolution there?
Oh yeah, I just had this hilarious idea when I was editing the video. I was like, you know what? I really want to put this funny GIF of like a ape transforming into a human, and it matches with the script, so why not?
No. There may be some folks that disagree with you out there, but then again, nobody would ever disagree on the internet. But I digress. We continue.
Do you think you are one of the smartest people on the planet?
Yes. I'm far enough off the curve that you could consider me a kind of anomaly, I guess. But certain people are going to crop up who have the kind of thought ability. I don't know whether it's discipline or whether it's just sheer raw brilliance that creates someone like me. I think no combination of determinacy and randomness can actually explain intelligence. Therefore, something more is required. A higher language. And that higher language would, by definition, be metaphysical.
Right, I think I'm understanding about as much of that as the horses at this moment in time.
Hey, you shush.
Okay, now, who even is this muscular guy, and why is he talking to that horse?
I totally love that. That's the point where I'm like, I'm totally gonna watch the rest of this video.
Thank
Just,
you.
just because. Well, this is the thing. It's like, it's a well put together video. You can show that it shows that you put care and effort into this, and you do the intro about what the heck's going on. Who is this person that came up with this? And it's like, who is this muscular dude, and why is he talking to that horse? Just that low key satire. I totally appreciate.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Okay, was that the angle you were going for? And some folks they just.
Yeah.
Okay.
Totally.
Okay, let's continue.
This man is Chris Langan.
So
and he
we go
reportedly
through.
has the
He did one of those
highest
IQ
in
tests.
America
He's a really
and
smart
possibly
guy.
the world.
I want to get into the actual CTMU, but essentially, what I took away was he's a smart dude. Because when I have heard him on with, I think Bernardo Castrop or something, the thing that I noticed, because my brother's like, this dude is really smart. This dude's really smart. My response was, this dude seems to have minimal lag. Like
Minimal lag, you said?
yes, like when he responds to something, it just flows.
Oh, yeah.
And for me, like, I feel like my mind just kind of like pops and just kind of like a carbureted car starting a little bit once in a while. I'm like, maybe it's the drugs, but okay. So the CTMU, he starts getting into, basically, I think there was like stuff doing things, and we go into the stuff here. Okay. The law of non-contradiction. A cannot be not A. Two contradictory statements cannot both be true at the same time and in the same way. Okay, was this a Christopher Langan thing, or was this a you thing that you kind of just interjected?
Okay, so this is what I did. So my personal understanding of the CTMU is kind of a combination of my own, I guess, my own thoughts plus the CTMU. So basically, like, it's basically trying to explain the CTMU how I understand it. And basically I was going off of what he said in the video. He said, oh, well, you induce the CTMU through logical induction. Okay, well, what does he mean whenever he says that? You start off with cogito ergo sum. Okay, now what is he getting at whenever he's pointing us in that direction? Well, what he's pointing at is that there is an identity there. There's an adherence to logic inherent to that. And so that's basically where I bring in the logic stuff and the law of like non-contradiction and all that, because my point was just to kind of hammer in that, in this subjective experience that we're having, although it is subjective, there's still a adherence to logic which stays invariant. So it's always there because we're always identifying something. Oh, you're muted.
Yes, boomerism. We had to totally do it. But all I'm saying is this a particular instance where category theory strikes again?
I don't know. I gotta admit, I'm still a bit uneducated when it comes to
Oh, me too. It's just if you get down to the categorization, maybe it's because I'm totally biased, and on one of the old unofficial Portal Discord servers, I was having a great private conversation with somebody at one point a few years back, and they're like, well, when we're talking about like artificial general intelligence, we got to figure out category theory. And anytime I bring that up to some of the GAI people, I don't hear them say no, because isn't that what we do as human beings? We're just categorizing stuff. We're chunking stuff together to try to figure out what's going on. That, and as far as coherence, I think that's why we have the metric system, and because it's each representation of the metric system has a degree of coherence with one another. Because it's like, yeah, we assign an arbitrary, this is a kilogram. This is actually, we went back in like 2017 and 2019, and we redefined SI to increase the coherence to make sure like the numbers we have aligned up more, which is fascinating in and of itself. But that's the thing. Once you pick something, the other degrees of freedom that you're operating with, there's going to be a relationship between them. Kind of like that whole like E equals MC squared and then like plus P of E, yada yada. The two little parts that we usually ignore. But it's just fascinating because from a logical perspective, it's like you're saying, okay, A cannot be not A. All right. So A is a thing. And then everything else, all the different stuff that's going on, is not that thing.
Right. Well, yes. I think I understand you correctly. Basically, like you're not identifying and not identifying at the same time, if that makes sense. Like your conscious experience is that of identifying something. So, yeah.
Well, then that goes into, I wanted to ask you earlier, it's like, are thoughts real?
Yes, but they're not real in the same sense as what, you know, you look at a chair and then you say the chair's real. Like there's a
So
distinction.
chair is a category.
Chair is a category, you said?
Yeah? Isn't it?
Yeah. I guess so, yeah. I know with regards to category theory, I know Chris Langan has commented on it. I don't recall his exact thoughts, but I know he seems a bit dissatisfied with its explanatory power.
I feel like folks like to really hype it up. Category theory, and since a lot of folks don't know what it means, it's kind of like when we went around like yelling like quantum whatever it is. Whoa, it must be fascinating. The problem is if you do that too much, it's kind of like the quote unquote boy that cried wolf. It's like, yes, and there might actually be a wolf there, but at that point you've kind of like, we heard category theory this, category theory that. It's like, okay, what's that mean? What's the relevance? So you want to get forward in the video a little bit more, just kind of because you start delving into some of these images and stuff.
Instantiation of the law of identity or the law of excluded middle. Either way, it is an adherence to logic. Either A or not A is true.
I just got a comment because it came up and James literally popped up in the chat. But when you were doing this, like the excluded middle, the way James categorizes things, he's like, it's the infinity limited. What are we going to do? We're going to set the bounds. We're going to have infinity and minus infinity. I don't know. Is that the excluded middle? That's why I'm like, I think we're talking about a lot of the same things. So that's go on.
I have an issue. This is my personal view. So maybe there is something there with regards to what he's saying. I have an issue with how people sometimes use infinity, like in a almost hand wavy sense rather than in
well, I mean, a lot of it is hand. We get these infinities and general relativities, so we're going to assume that it's either right or it's not right. So it's gonna be an infinitely small point of infinite density. It's like, I mean, maybe. I mean, I would love to think that. I mean, at that point, I would assume that something would turn itself inside out or something. At that point.
I was having this discussion, a similar discussion to this, with some friends recently, because they were talking about infinity, and one of them is an engineering student, along with me. The other one is like a philosophy student. And I stopped them. I'm like, okay, what the hell do y'all mean by infinity? Because in mathematics, okay, there's it's a little bit different. So you have like a set. You can have a set that's infinite in size, or you can have a process which is infinite, or like a sequence which is infinite. But they seem to be talking about infinite potentiality, or like unbounded potentiality. That's kind of what they were referring to, and they were calling that infinity. And I was just kind of I think that's kind of an inaccurate way. I don't know if that's the right word.
No. When you say potentiality, did you all delve into like what they meant by that?
Not exactly. We had a few drinks, so we weren't entirely focused on.
Oh, dude, that's what some of the greatest conversations could happen and stuff. You're not trying to do a live stream or anything like that. You're just with some friends. And honestly, I think a lot of the best discussions happen before streams and after. Heck, I mean, we were talking for a little bit before we actually went live for a little bit. Totally my fault. I was totally late again. If there's a 45th constant of the universe, I'm probably going to be late.
It's fine.
That's the thing, and James, maybe you and James should have a conversation at some point. Okay, you wanted to say something before.
Oh wait, me?
Yes.
Oh no, I'm done.
Okay.
To paint a better picture, the qualia associated with the apple either exists or it does not exist. While you're identifying or not A has already been decided.
No,
something
the poor
has been
Schrodinger's cat.
ontologically distinguished
from
something
sad.
else.
I want to get up to. Let's skip it.
S can be understood as a self-contained medium, which is the most fundamental of all mediums. If you were to assume some medium existed outside S, then the medium containing both can just be redefined as S until we arrive at a medium which relies on no external medium. But isn't this
So, I mean, again,
It's turtles all the way down.
It is,
I don't-
but it isn't. It is, but it isn't. So in the CTMU, it's interesting because the turtles all the way down type process, where you just have an unending process going over and over, that is allowed.
you're putting a binding of the substrate. It's like, okay, the substrate is whatever it needs to be. I mean, it's logical, right?
Wait, what was that? Can you say that again?
Basically, rather than turtle, you're basically just bounding S, which you call a substrate or whatever.
Yeah. So if you have like an infinite process, or you have this infinite stack of turtles, what is the medium that allows for the turtles to be stacked upon each other? Yeah.
Turtletonium? I don't know. So, yeah, well, that's the thing. It's like, if you're just going to go into that, it's like, it could be whatever you really want there. So it's like, that's why I think Professor Wolfram and the Wolfram physics model, they're saying, okay, we're just talking about atoms of existence. What are those? We're going to call them eames. And just by that definition, eames are pre-mimetic. So I'm all right with it. Shall we continue?
Yeah, we shall. Also, real quick, I'm going to go charge my laptop, so give me just a second.
Oh, yeah, no, we'll go through a bit of the video, so do your thing, take your time.
an unending process or infinite regress of digging to deeper mediums? Well, some structure or medium would have to allow that process to exist ad infinitum, right? Well, there's your most fundamental medium. Since this fundamental medium relies on nothing external to itself to support itself, then any mappings on it will have their domain inside the medium. And by virtue of the medium's self-containment, any mapping on it will also have its codomain inside the medium.
Wait. So whatever stuff we have is going to be doing a thing to keep it within the stuff. How very interesting.
Otherwise, we have not identified the most fundamental medium. Therefore, any mapping is from S to itself.
That might explain
The
a lot.
attribution of property E can be understood as a mapping called mu. Some part of S, or S can be understood as a mapping
I just saw a little beep up. I don't
some
know
part
what it
of
was.
S, or S in its entirety, is going to be the domain of the mapping. Mu functions to apply property E to some stuff in S and not to other stuff in S. The result is the codomain of the mapping, which, at the very least, has a subset in S that you are able to directly know as the set A.
So mu does things to the some stuff within the A.
Yeah, it's a function or a map.
No, it's stuff doing things. It's like, do I know all these Hamiltonians, Lagrangians, and all this thought and everything? No, I don't. That's what the internet and smart people like you are for. It's like, okay, the stuff doing things, and then there may be applicable force or something like that. I just chuck it together. It's like, okay, or you might have things doing stuff. I believe that's isomorphic in a way. So it's like, I'm like, dude, I've listened to a lot of physics lectures and stuff, not knowing what's going on. But all I know is, rather than electron, this, that, or very particular things, yes, if I search for stuff and things, or thing and stuff, I'm pretty sure those are going to be the larger percentage of the words used in those discussions. Because you could search through lectures on YouTube and stuff like that. They'll actually provide the transcript and stuff. So it's like, see, I've already used stuff or things like interchangeably within these different bounds. So it's like, okay. And then you just go into the particulars, right? So, okay.
The rest of the codomain is everything which has the property E, at least as a bare minimum. So S effectively attributes to itself the property E through the mapping mu. And since E is instantiated by mu, then S self-actualizes itself to match the generic form determined by mu. This generic form is, minimally, that of non-contradiction and identification of an ontological identity which can be unequivocally known through a subjective conscious experience.
So it kind of sounds like E is a particular categorification of whatever topology that M is mapping onto via U and
Wait,
A.
can you say that first part again?
Basically, E is a property. So some may say that's a form of a category. I could be getting that wrong. Maybe it's within another mathematical theory or set theory or something. But it's like E is an identifying factor that ends up being mapped on.
Right. Yeah.
Okay.
Or like you could also consider it a bound.
Okay.
So like the application of a bound on a
Okay, so
potential.
you're saying a boundary on whatever is going on within
Yeah.
the greater category of E or whatever has those properties.
Right.
Cool. All right.
The experiencer and all that is experienced is an image of mu. When I say S self-actualizes,
Alrighty.
I mean that S determines for itself what becomes actualized and what does not. It self-determines. It determines itself. Since S's definition cannot rely on anything external to itself, then it must be self-definitive in a very general sense. We'll call the property corresponding to this C. C is an intrinsic property for S. Otherwise, S would be without any definition. Therefore, C is characteristic of S. For any medium, the characteristic or defining properties of that medium distribute to everything inside of itself.
So C like a constant?
Well,
Or is that
but-
a constant that arises due to whatever configuration the system has?
what do you mean by constant? It's like a well.
It's an
part of the
intrinsic
identity.
property, but is it an intrinsic property because that's the way it was before you had the property of E coming in? Or is it a intrinsic characteristic because of E coming in?
Oh, okay. It's an intrinsic characteristic because. Oh, well, that's a good question. Like,
I ask because I don't know. I mean, no. Maybe that's something for future exploration. Maybe we could look into that together.
I mean, think about this. You can't. This argument wouldn't be able to take place without the property E being attributed. But then, C is like what gives rise to the attribution of E in the first place. So there's kind of like a correspondence or a codependency.
So let me put it this way. Let's reduce it. What came first, the chicken or the egg? C or E?
I would have to say C. C came first because C is like basically, it's basically.
So it's
like
an intrinsic
ultimate
property
free
that's
will.
responding to whatever E in the mapping is going to happen. Okay, no.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not like they could happen at the same time. That would be neat.
Wait, you said do they happen?
I'm entertaining the idea. What if they just happen at the same time?
Well, yeah, they do.
Cool.
something inside the medium did not have the defining properties of the medium, it necessarily would not be part of the medium. For example, if something did not have the defining properties of the medium of space, then it would not be part of space. A clear example of this would be something like time. Time doesn't have the quote-unquote spaceness that matter does. Since S is defined by C, then everything inside S must also have C, which, for reference again, is self-determinacy. Otherwise, that part of S would not be an S. The consequence of this is that everything within S inherits the very general kind of self-determinacy utilized by S. So that means the experiencer and everything which is experienced inherits self-determinacy to some degree.
Did you want to go into that at all? Because I kind of get like C is within whatever S is the thing, and I don't really know.
Wait, you don't understand like the distribution?
I know, I understand. It's like C is a property of S and everything, so we're just trying to say you're trying to separate how. Just a method for thinking about what might actually be going on. So it's like, all right, you have these characteristics. Anything that might affect these is going to affect it in a particular way. It's there are words I'm not really. This is one of my second time really looking through it. So
if you have some sort of identity or medium, then the everything which is non-contradictory with respect to that identity is going to, like, the identity can't contradict itself, right? Because it's an identity.
okay.
So yeah.
I just see a fish tank. It's like the characteristic of everything within this fish tank. That's like this might be the fish's cool little house or castle or something like that. And then there's a bunch of water around it. So everything with the fish tank will have water, but A might actually have some water in it. But A might actually be a different substrate of whatever the substrate is. The substrate will still here, but then whatever's going on here, maybe it's like I don't know. That's. People have been talking about the Little Mermaid, so maybe it's just the fishes on my brain, because they are so delish. But, okay. No, I'm just, let's see if we can get through this. Where are we? Oh, back here. Boom.
To define or determine itself, S must refer to itself in some way. Another way to say this is like this. In order to determine itself, it must be aware of what it is it's determining. S must be able to register what it is trying to determine. A concrete example would be human self-actualization. You cannot consciously choose the version of yourself that you want to become unless you are aware of all of the list of options. By generating the list of options and referring to them, you are becoming aware of yourself.
Wait a sec. That sounds like a choose-your-own-adventure game.
Wait, what? Sounds like a what?
A choose-your-own-adventure game. I like those. Those were fun.
Oh yeah, they're very fun.
I mean, I'll
just
take
make
it.
sure you're, you know which adventure you've chosen.
Yeah, I think we should also maybe have the assumption that our journey might actually be important, because if it's going to affect other people, you never know how down the line things may happen. I mean, you just may go through. Do you ever watch Breaking Bad?
No, unfortunately not.
Okay, you don't need to. Sorry, spoilers. Like a decade or so later, at one point, one of the main characters, Walter Wright, one of his meth brewing again, the means of destruction channel. We do not promote illicit drug use or entheogen use unless it's properly prescribed by a licensed physician and promoted, obviously, gone by a multi-billion-dollar pharmaceutical company.
Yeah,
But,
if a psychiatrist prescribes you
drugs are
heroin,
bad.
then go ahead.
But it's one of those things where his yes, that was a 20-second side tangent. So basically, one of his meth making partners had a girlfriend, and they've been doing heroin and stuff like that. And at one point, she rolls over in bed. She starts throwing up in her own mouth. He has a chance to save her. He doesn't. He's like, she's bad for him. It's like, so she let his girlfriend die, and eventually the girlfriend. Her father was an air traffic controller. Her death shocked him so much, he screwed up while doing air traffic control, and two planes collided. And you're like, and later down the line, it's like he figures out, yeah, the dude that happened, he was distraught having to go to work and everything, and it's like he just lost his daughter. So he wasn't paying attention on really. That's why it's like, okay, if everything affects everybody, maybe, I don't know, it kind of sounds like free will and consequence, but... Sorry, we'll
That's why I think it's important to understand what is the journey you're on. What's the trajectory?
Yeah, what type of game you're trying to play, like you were saying.
It's called an acceptance.
Recognition is synonymous with the computational notion of acceptance by
I think I've seen some of these graphs of the Wolfram live streams.
Acceptors are mathematically
I
defined
don't know if you even follow us. I don't think so.
that read input and output a 1 or 0, depending on whether or not that input is accepted. Essentially, 1 or 0 is decided. A or not A. E or not E. Sound familiar? The input read by an acceptor is labeled as the language, which is read by the acceptor. If you ever hear Langan talking about languages within the context of the CTMU, he's referring to this notion of a language. It's much more general than standard natural languages, and it's known as a formal language. Anyways, back to acceptor.
So what What is a formal language, to the best of your knowledge?
Okay, so it's dang, it's basically a part of logic, like the study of formal logic. So you have a grammar. Basically, like a language is composed of a grammar and then an alphabet and then a set of productions or like products from the alphabet. And the grammar basically just tells you how to create well-formed sentences. So you think about English, like we have grammar that tells us what sentences are well-formed and intelligible. Mathematics, that's also a language. It falls under formal language definition because there's a certain syntax and grammar. Chris Langan will talk about syntax, right? So there's a certain grammar that has to be adhered to if what you're going to describe in mathematics is to be rendered intelligible. Now, what if you actually apply that to reality and what is considered intelligible in general? Then there has to be a sort of grammar corresponding to that, and a language corresponding to that as well, which in the CTMU, that grammar is called the mu grammar. So kind of like how I had the mu function earlier. It's basically the same thing. And then the language is a self-configuring, self-processing language. That's how Langan describes it.
So is it similar, or it sounds maybe more like almost an assembly language version of kind of something like this? Because I remember I was helping one of my friends with some of her philosophy homework, and one of it was like Quine's two dogmas of empiricism, and like kind of like this has been probably cited for a lot of folks, where it's like Quine begins by, and again this is just from Wikipedia, take it for what's worth, means by making a distinction between two different classes of analytical statements. The first one is called logically untrue and has a form, number one, no unmarried man is married. And a sentence with that form is true independent of the interpretation of man and married, so long as the logical particles of no and un and is have their ordinary English meaning. The statement in the second class of the form, no bachelor is married. So basically, there may be synonyms and then other category. It's basically you're utilizing these things, and this is almost like a mimetic reduction, if you would. You're combining some of those things. It's like unmarried man, typically we use the term bachelor, and then you still have is married, and you still have that no component. I mean, I'm probably completely butchering it, but rather than
I think
going on for 2 hours.
I think there's there's definitely something there. Basically, you're like transforming it so that the meaning is the same, the syntax, the general syntax of that statement, and then
I mean that's what we do with mathematics and stuff when we're translating things around. It's like as long as they can be computationally equivalent, it's like that's the problem where like language is hard. So
yeah.
So that's why you have so many question marks going on right here. It's like, what the heck is actually going on? But it sounds like we have a really smart dude that's spent a lot of time and has been talking about an idea that seems to resonate with a lot of folks. Because I hear a lot of folks say really great things about it. I'm like, all right, maybe I should probably actually go back and listen to Kurt's interview with him at some point. Because again, seems like a smart dude. And apparently he also happens to work as a door guy at some point at some local establishments. And as somebody that may have spent a short stint of time doing the same thing, I can respect the brother.
Nice.
So.
Yeah, it seems like the CTMU is gaining some more traction online. So for a short while, people were being very disrespectful, I would say. Basically just trolling.
Wait, was it because of the model or because of the man presenting the model?
It was a mix of both. It was a mix of both. So it was basically like, oh, well, look at this guy. Look at the stuff he's saying. And then, oh, look at all these words. Like, I can't make sense out of all this. Oh, and look, I got a friend of mine who's doing a bachelor's in math, and he says it's nonsense too. How great is that? But really,
the internet, we can find confirmation wherever we look, or if we look hard enough.
Yeah, exactly.
Sorry, go on.
Yeah, exactly. And, I know quite a few math majors. They're not all as educated as some may think. You know, everyone has insights, everyone has boundaries and limitations, but it's important to stay humble and to, you know, be respectful.
I mean, I agree with that, and that's one of the things. It's like it's an interesting dynamic, and I'm just curious to maybe finish off with like your thoughts on this because you're of a bit of a younger generation than myself. I grew up when America was starting to get online and everything, like in the '90s and stuff like that. I remember the pre-AOL days. I remember the pre, oh look, I have a mobile phone, yay, first world problem, and like calling. I grew up. There was a rotary phone in one of the rooms. Man, texting was hard on that. But when you would call, you'd ask, hey, it's so and so home, not where you at. It's somebody home. And that's a different dynamic. And I'm realizing, like, there are kids growing up where social media has always been a thing. I remember, I was told by actually a really smart young person on one of these different Discord servers at one point, it's like, well, memes, your generation was the last generation to, like, just be bored. I remember being at work, it's like, I'm reading SKUs off of different hardware products. Why? Because it was the only thing around. You know, I couldn't crush candies for hours and everything. God, the horrificness of it. But what are your thoughts about being in this era where we have like instant access to like the libraries of Alexandria to the nth power and everything, and being able to learn in a multitude of different formats, whether it's text-based, whether it's audio-based, whether it's video-based? Like, what's going on, man? The floor is yours.
Dude, I'm glad you asked that because I've been thinking about this a lot recently, and I think it's honestly like the most critical aspect of our generation, or most defining aspect of our generation. And I think it's going to make or break a lot of people, because the people that have the potential to use those resources to achieve their highest good, they're going to be able to do that, and they're going to be able to do it really damn well. Really, really damn well. The people that, you know, they just soak up information like sponges, and, you know, they're very hardworking and efficient. They can manage their time well. However, the downside of that is that technology allows us to dissociate very readily and easily, and can make us dissociate in a myriad of different ways away from, you know, perhaps our highest potential, or what we should really be doing. And that's a danger, because I think it serves as a ginormous, ridiculous distraction. Because, you know, I see tons of my friends, they're like about to graduate college, and they're still playing video games. Now, I think there's value to that, because it's very stress relieving. But, you know, you got to understand what exactly is being fulfilled there. What are people seeking to fulfill by using the internet? And, you know, back whenever the internet wasn't as big as it was today, it's a very different situation. People would have to actually go out and engage with the real world in order to fulfill those same needs. Now it's a lot easier to keep yourself atomized away from everyone else. And yeah, it's beneficial, but also potentially very dangerous.
Cool. No, see, it's the future generation gives me hope, and the reason why is the sheer fact that like you're actually cognizant of that and everything. And if you watch a lot of videos, it seems like some folks, I feel like most folks are good people. It's just the things that we choose to stress often may have a whole bunch of different particular reasons and everything. I must say that as a server first level 80 Death Knight in OG WoW back in the day, I learned a lot about human beings from the game, watching how people would discuss things in trade chat, in just a local chat within a raid group, in our different groups, and then just personally on Ventrilo and TeamSpeak. Yes, I'm that old man. There ain't no Discord back in the day for all that stuff.
Old man.
Exactly, yes, old man memes here. Oh God, is that what like Old Hulk was like? I think that would be. I loved Old Hulk. He was very charming. He had a beard. But my big thing is I learned a lot about people just coming at it from a bunch of different angles, seeing what like it's important to them and everything, and just the sheer fact that enough young people, I feel, are aware of these different dynamics, that maybe if we can account for these different dynamics, we can better help figure out what's going on. And
Yeah.
hey, thank you for giving me your time, sitting down to explain some of these things and helping me try to figure out what the heck's
Thank you.
happening.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, Paradiso's is linked to his channel is in the description down below. If there's anything else you'd like me to link, any resources, just shoot them to me on Discord, and we'll go over it. Yeah, toss in the doobly-doo. So thank you all for watching. Peace out, everybody. Take care of yourselves. And
Bye.
again, you got to remember, we have yet to
The
prove.
world exists on the top of a giant turtle.
Peace out, everybody.
Have you guys checked out the Memes of Destruction's channel? He's an interesting dude. I like him.